The legal papers felt heavier than they should have in my trembling hands. How had it come to this? Just 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was Dulcinea Vane, Dulcie to everyone who mattered, and I deserved better than what I was getting. At 32, I felt like life was passing me by in our cramped apartment with Jonas, my boyfriend of 5 years, who seemed more interested in his spreadsheets than in me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. But standing here now, staring at the eviction notice and asset separation documents, I realized I might have miscalculated everything. The apartment felt suffocating that Tuesday evening in March. Jonas sat hunched over his laptop at our tiny dining table, his fingers clicking away at some data analysis project that apparently couldn't wait until morning. The blue glow from his screen cast shadows across his face, making him look older than his 34 years. I stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing the new dress I'd bought specifically to get his attention, a fitted red number that hugged my curves in all the right places. I'd even done my hair, letting my dark waves cascade over my shoulders, the way he used to love. But he hadn't even looked up when I walked into the room. "Jonas," I said, my voice carrying just a hint of irritation. "I'm talking to you." He mumbled, not lifting his eyes from the screen. "Just give me 5 more minutes, Dulcie. This quarterly report is due tomorrow morning, and the numbers aren't adding up." 5 more minutes. It was always 5 more minutes with him. 5 more minutes that turned into an hour, then 2, until I'd given up and gone to bed alone, while he stayed up working on whatever crisis his company had dumped on him this time. "You always say that," I snapped, crossing my arms. "When was the last time we actually talked? Really talked, not just you grunting responses while you stare at that stupid computer." Jonas finally looked up, and I could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. His brown hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, a nervous habit he'd developed over the past year as his workload increased. "I'm sorry, okay? But this is important. Mr. Henderson specifically asked me to handle this analysis, and if I mess it up—" "What about us?" I interrupted. "When did we stop being important?" He closed the laptop with a sigh and rubbed his temples. "That's not fair, Dulcie. You know I'm working toward that promotion. Once I get it, things will be different. We can finally start saving for a house. Maybe even think about—" "About what? Getting married? Having kids? We've been talking about someday for 5 years, Jonas. I'm 32. I don't have forever to wait around for you to decide I'm worth prioritizing." The hurt that flashed across his face almost made me feel guilty. Almost, but I was tired of feeling guilty for wanting more from our relationship. I was tired of coming home from my soul-crushing customer service job to find him buried in work. I was tired of feeling invisible in my own home. "I don't know what you want from me," he said quietly. "I'm doing the best I can. This job, this promotion, it's for us. For our future." "What future?" The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take them back. "All I see is you disappearing more and more into your work while I sit here, wondering what happened to the man I fell in love with." Jonas stood up and tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. His hand fell to his side, and something in his expression crumbled. "Dulcie, please. I know things have been tough lately, but—" "Tough?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jonas, we're roommates who share a bed. When was the last time you kissed me? Really kissed me? Not just a peck on the forehead before you rush off to work?" He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out, because he couldn't remember either. "Other people notice me," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Other people see me as more than just someone to split the rent with." "What's that supposed to mean?" But I was already walking toward the bedroom, my phone in my hand. "Forget it. Just forget I said anything." I slammed the bedroom door behind me and threw myself onto the bed. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Ellie. "How did the talk go?" I told her about my plan to confront Jonas about our relationship, about how distant he'd become. Ellie had been supportive, as always. She'd never liked Jonas much anyway. Thought he was too boring for me. Terrible, I typed back. He just doesn't get it. Too wrapped up in work to care. Her response came quickly. You deserve so much better, Dulcie. You're beautiful and smart, and any man would be lucky to have you. Don't let him make you feel like you're asking for too much. I smiled at her words. At least someone understood. At least someone saw my worth. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Ellie. It was Leo Dorman from work, sending me a funny meme about our boss's terrible hairpiece. I found myself grinning as I typed back a laughing emoji. Leo always knew how to make me smile. He was 29, charming, and actually paid attention when I talked. Unlike some people. I glanced at the closed bedroom door, behind which I could hear Jonas opening his laptop again. The clicking of keys resumed, each tap feeling like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. Before I could talk myself out of it, I opened a new text to Leo. You awake? The response came within seconds. Always for you. Rough night? I stared at those words, feeling something flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in months. Someone cared enough to ask. Someone was interested in my feelings. Yeah, I typed back. Could use someone to talk to. I'm here, came his reply, followed by a heart emoji. I set the phone on my nightstand and stared at the ceiling, listening to Jonas's typing through the wall. When had everything gone so wrong between us? When had I become so invisible to the man I'd once planned to marry? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Leo. Sweet dreams, beautiful. Tomorrow will be better. Beautiful. When was the last time Jonas had called me beautiful? I turned off the light and pulled the covers up to my chin, but sleep was a long time coming. Through the thin walls, I could hear Jonas still working, still choosing his job over me. Maybe it was time I started choosing myself. The next morning, Jonas was already gone when I woke up. No note, no goodbye kiss, just the lingering smell of his coffee and the sound of his car pulling out of the parking lot. I found myself checking my phone immediately, hoping for a good morning text from Leo. There it was. Hope you slept better than you expected. Coffee later. I smiled as I got ready for work, taking extra care with my makeup and choosing a blouse that showed just a hint of cleavage. Not too much. I didn't want to deal with our uptight HR manager, but enough to feel confident. The morning dragged by in a blur of angry customers and system crashes. I worked in customer service for a mid-sized insurance company, spending my days explaining policy details to people who were usually calling because something had gone wrong in their lives. It wasn't exactly fulfilling work, but it paid the bills while Jonas chased his dreams of corporate success. By lunchtime, I was more than ready for a break. I found Leo waiting for me in the break room, his sandy brown hair perfectly tousled and his green eyes lighting up when he saw me. There's my favorite person, he said, standing up from the small table where he'd been scrolling through his phone. You look incredible today. I felt my cheeks flush with pleasure. Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself. Leo worked in the marketing department, which meant he dressed better than most of the guys in the office. Today he wore a fitted navy shirt that showed off his lean build and dark jeans that probably cost more than I made in a week. Everything about him was effortless and confident in a way that made me feel more attractive just by being near him. So, he said, pulling out a chair for me, tell me about this rough night. Boyfriend troubles? I hesitated for a moment. Talking about Jonas felt like crossing a line somehow, but Leo's concerned expression made it easy to open up. We had another fight, I admitted, sitting down across from him. Or rather, I tried to talk to him about our relationship, and he basically ignored me for his laptop. Leo shook his head sympathetically. I don't understand guys like that. If I had someone like you waiting for me at home, work would be the last thing on my mind. The way he said it, looking directly into my eyes, made my stomach flip. It wasn't always like this, I found myself explaining. When we first got together, he was different, more attentive, but lately, it's like I'm just part of the furniture. His loss, Leo said simply. Any man who doesn't appreciate what he has doesn't deserve it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and I became acutely aware of how close we were sitting. Our knees were almost touching under the small table, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made me want to lean closer. You know, Leo said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm always here, day or night. That's sweet of you, I said, meaning it. It's nice to have someone who actually listens. It's easy to listen to you, he replied. You have this way of making everything sound interesting, even the boring insurance stuff. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. You're just saying that. I'm not, he said seriously. You're incredible, Dulcie, smart, funny, beautiful. I hope you know that. Before I could respond, the break room door opened and Sarah from accounting walked in. She glanced at us sitting close together and raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything as she headed to the refrigerator. Leo and I automatically scooted our chairs apart, but the moment had already been broken. The reminder that we were in public, that people might talk, brought reality crashing back. I should probably get back, I said reluctantly, checking the time on my phone. Of course, Leo said, but his eyes lingered on my face. Maybe we could continue this conversation sometime when we have more privacy. The suggestion hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. I knew I should say no, should maintain appropriate boundaries. But the way he was looking at me, like I was the most fascinating woman in the world, made it hard to think clearly. Maybe, I said softly. That evening, I got home before Jonas again. I'd stopped at the grocery store and picked up ingredients for his favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with garlic bread. Maybe if I made an effort, he would too. I was just pulling the chicken out of the oven when he walked through the door, looking as tired and distracted as always. Hey, he said, barely glancing at me as he set down his briefcase. Something smells good. I made your favorite, I said, hoping for some enthusiasm. That's nice. Thanks. He was already checking his phone, frowning at whatever message he'd received. Listen, I might have to log back on after dinner. We had some issues with the quarterly projections today, and Mr. Henderson wants them fixed by morning. My heart sank. Can't someone else handle it? You've been working late every night this week. It's my responsibility, he said, finally looking at me. You know how important this promotion is. What about us? I asked, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. When do we become important? Jonas sighed and rubbed his forehead. Can we not do this tonight? I'm exhausted, and I really need to focus on getting this project done. I stared at him, feeling the familiar sting of rejection. Fine, whatever. We ate dinner in relative silence, Jonas scrolling through work emails on his phone between bites. I found myself thinking about lunch with Leo, how he'd given me his complete attention, how he'd made me feel like I mattered. After dinner, Jonas disappeared into the bedroom with his laptop, leaving me to clean up alone. As I loaded the dishwasher, my phone buzzed with a text. How was the rest of your day? Leo had written. I glanced toward the bedroom, where I could already hear Jonas typing away, and typed back, lonely. That's a crime, came his immediate response. Someone like you should never have to feel lonely. I found myself smiling despite my frustration. At least someone cared about my feelings. Working late again, Leo asked. Mandatory overtime, I typed, which wasn't exactly a lie. Jonas's work did feel mandatory at this point, even if it was taking over our entire relationship. Well, if you need someone to talk to, I'm just a text away, Leo replied, followed by a winking emoji. I set the phone down and finished cleaning the kitchen, but I couldn't stop thinking about Leo's words, the way he looked at me, the way he made me feel seen and appreciated. When I finally went to bed, Jonas was still working. He barely looked up when I kissed his forehead goodnight, just mumbled something about being done soon. But as I lay in the dark, listening to his typing, I couldn't help wondering what it would be like to be with someone who actually wanted to spend time with me. Someone who thought I was worth putting down the laptop for. Someone like Leo. The next few weeks fell into a depressing routine. Jonas worked late almost every night, either at the office or hunched over his laptop in our bedroom. I found myself spending more and more time texting with Leo, sharing the small frustrations and victories of my day with someone who actually seemed to care. Our lunch breaks became a regular thing, and I started looking forward to them more than I probably should have. Leo had a way of making me laugh, of making me feel interesting and desirable in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. It was during one of these lunch conversations that I made a decision that would change everything. "You seem happier lately," my sister Ellie observed when we met for coffee at our usual spot downtown. The cafe was busy with the Saturday afternoon crowd, filled with the chatter of friends catching up and the hiss of the espresso machine. "Do I?" I asked, stirring sugar into my latte. "Yeah, you do. Things better with Jonas?" I made a face. "Hardly. If anything, they're worse. He's been working until midnight every night this week. I barely see him anymore." Ellie frowned. She was 28, 4 years younger than me, but sometimes I felt like she was the wiser sister. She had her life together. Good job, nice apartment, a string of boyfriends who actually treated her well. "That's not healthy, Dulcie. You can't be in a relationship by yourself." "I know," I said, then found myself smiling. "But I've been talking to someone at work. Leo. He's in marketing, and he gets it, you know? He actually listens when I talk." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Just talking?" "Of course just talking," I said quickly, though I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "We're friends. It's nice to have someone who sees me as more than just a roommate who splits the bills." "You deserve that," Ellie said firmly. "You deserve someone who makes you a priority. Jonas has had 5 years to figure that out." Her words echoed in my head as more people joined our table, a few mutual friends, including Marcus Blackwell, Jonas's older brother. Marcus was 36 and had never liked me much, though he tried to hide it for Jonas's sake. "Where's my brother today?" Marcus asked as he sat down with his coffee. "Working," I said with a sigh. "As usual." "The man's dedicated," Marcus said, and I caught the slight edge in his voice. "He's been busting his ass for that promotion. Should pay off soon." "It would be nice if he remembered he has a girlfriend while he's busting his ass," I replied. The comment earned a few sympathetic murmurs from the other women at the table, but Marcus's expression hardened. "He's trying to build a future," Marcus said. "Some people appreciate that kind of commitment." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, feeling my temper flare. "Nothing," Marcus said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Just that not everyone understands what it takes to get ahead." Ellie jumped to my defense. "Dulcie works just as hard as Jonas does. She shouldn't have to sacrifice having a relationship just because he's obsessed with his career." "I'm not asking him to quit his job," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I just want him to remember I exist. When was the last time he planned a date, or even asked about my day without checking his phone? Maybe he'd be more romantic if he wasn't stressed about supporting both of you," Marcus shot back. The table went quiet. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. "I pay half the bills," I said coldly. "And I'm not the one who chose to make work more important than our relationship." "Right," Marcus said sarcastically. "It's all Jonas's fault. Poor Dulcie, stuck with a man who works hard to provide for their future." "Marcus," one of our friends said uncomfortably, "maybe we should—" "No, it's fine," I said, standing up. "I can see where Jonas gets his priorities from. Work first, everything else second." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, Ellie close behind me. "Don't listen to him," she said once we were outside. "He's always been protective of Jonas, but that doesn't mean he's right." "I know," I said, but Marcus's words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. Jonas was working hard, trying to build something for us. But did that mean I had to disappear in the process? That night, I was still fuming when Jonas came home. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, and his hair messy from another long day at the office. "How was coffee with Ellie?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Fine until your brother showed up," I said, not looking up from my magazine. "Marcus was there. What happened?" I told him about the conversation, watching his face carefully for his reaction. Instead of being upset with his brother for embarrassing me, Jonas just looked tired. "He shouldn't have said that," Jonas said finally. "But Dulcie, you have to understand the pressure I'm under right now. This promotion could change everything, I know," I finished. "You've said that before. But what if it doesn't? What if you get the promotion and there's just more work, more pressure, more reasons to ignore our relationship?" "That won't happen," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. "How do you know?" I asked. "When was the last time you turned off your phone for an entire evening? When was the last time you planned something for us that didn't get cancelled because of work?" Jonas was quiet for a long moment. "After I get this promotion—" "There you go again," I said, throwing down my magazine. "Always after. After the promotion, after this project, after that deadline. I'm tired of living in the after, Jonas. I want to live now." He reached for me, but I pulled away. "I'm going to bed," I said. "Try not to wake me up when you finally come to bed at 2 a.m. As I lay in the dark listening to him open his laptop yet again, I found myself thinking about Leo, about how he looked at me like I was the most important person in the room, about how he made time for me without needing to check his calendar first. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. A text from Leo. "Hope you had a good day. Sweet dreams. Beautiful." I smiled in the darkness and typed back, "Better now. Thank you." "Always here if you need me," he replied. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, but sleep was elusive. In the next room, I could hear Jonas typing away, choosing his work over me once again. Maybe it was time I started making some choices of my own. 3 weeks later, everything came to a head on a Friday night in April. I'd had an especially difficult day at work. Our computer system had crashed twice, leaving me to deal with angry customers who couldn't access their accounts. All I wanted was to come home to a boyfriend who would listen to me vent and maybe order takeout so we could have a quiet evening together. Instead, I found Jonas exactly where I expected, hunched over his laptop at the dining table, surrounded by spreadsheets and empty coffee cups. "Hey," I said, dropping my purse on the counter with more force than necessary. "Hey," he mumbled without looking up. "How was work?" "Terrible," I said, waiting for him to ask why. He didn't. I stood there for a full minute, watching him type, waiting for him to show even a flicker of interest in my day. When it became clear that wasn't going to happen, I felt something inside me snap. "I said I had a terrible day," I said louder. That sucks," he replied absently, still focused on his screen. "Jonas," I snapped. "Look at me." He finally looked up, blinking like he was surprised to find me standing there. "What?" "Sorry, I'm just trying to finish this analysis before Monday. What did you say?" "I said I had a terrible day, but apparently that's not as important as whatever numbers you're staring at." Jonas rubbed his eyes and closed the laptop. "I'm sorry. Tell me what happened." But it was too late. The dismissive way he'd ignored me, the fact that I had to demand his attention like a child, had triggered something I couldn't take back. "Forget it," I said. "Just forget I said anything. Come on, Dulcie. Don't be like this. I'm listening now." "Now?" I laughed bitterly. "After I had to practically scream to get your attention, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't care about me anymore. You don't care about us." "That's not true," Jonas said, standing up. "You know I care about you, but I have responsibilities." "To everyone except me," I interrupted. "When was the last time you asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you planned a date, or brought me flowers, or did anything that showed you still want to be with me?" Jonas opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, because he couldn't remember either. I've been thinking, I continued, the words pouring out of me like water through a broken dam. Maybe we want different things. Maybe we're just not compatible anymore. What are you saying? Jonas asked, and for the first time in weeks, I had his complete attention. I'm saying I feel invisible in this relationship. I feel like I'm dating a ghost who occasionally emerges from his laptop to grunt responses at me. I'm working toward our future. Our future. I laughed harshly. What future? You haven't proposed. We don't live together because we're building something. We live together because it's convenient and cheap. I'm 32 years old, Jonas. I don't have time to wait around hoping you'll eventually decide I'm worth prioritizing. The hurt that flashed across his face almost made me feel guilty, but I was too angry to stop. I deserve better than this, I said. I deserve someone who wants to spend time with me. Someone who makes me feel like I matter. You do matter, Jonas said quietly. You matter more than anything. But this promotion is more important than me. You've made that very clear. We stared at each other across our small living room, 5 years of relationship hanging in the balance. I could see Jonas struggling to find the right words, but it was too little, too late. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Without thinking, I pulled it out and saw a text from Leo. Drinks tonight. You look like you could use some fun. The timing was perfect. Here was someone who wanted to spend time with me, who noticed when I needed cheering up, someone who saw me as more than just a convenient roommate. I'm going out, I said, grabbing my purse. Dulcie, wait, we need to talk about this. We just did, I replied, heading for the door. And I'm done pretending this is working when it clearly isn't. Where are you going? Jonas called after me. I paused at the door and looked back at him. He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand how we'd gotten to this point. That almost made it worse. Somewhere I'm wanted, I said, and walked out. I met Leo at a trendy bar downtown, the kind of place Jonas and I never went to because he was always too tired or too busy. Leo was waiting at a high-top table, looking handsome in a fitted black shirt and jeans. He stood up and hugged me when I approached, and I let myself enjoy the feeling of strong arms around me. Rough day? He asked, signaling the bartender. Rough relationship, I said, sliding onto the bar stool across from him. We talked for hours, or rather, I talked, and Leo listened. Really listened, asking follow-up questions and making sympathetic sounds in all the right places. He told me I was too good for someone who didn't appreciate me, that any man would be lucky to have my attention. By the time we left the bar, I was feeling more confident than I had in months. Leo walked me to my car, and we stood in the parking lot talking for another 20 minutes. You know, he said, stepping closer to me, you deserve so much better than what you're getting. I know, I said softly, very aware of how close we were standing. If you were mine, he said, his voice low and intimate, I'd never let you feel unappreciated. The way he was looking at me, like I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, made my heart race. It had been so long since someone had looked at me like that. Leo, I started, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. I know you're with someone, he said, but if that ever changes... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The implication hung in the air between us, full of possibility and promise. I drove home in a daze, my head spinning from the alcohol and the attention. When I got back to the apartment, Jonas was waiting up for me, sitting on the couch with his laptop closed beside him. We need to talk, he said as soon as I walked in. I don't want to talk, I said, kicking off my heels. I want to go to bed. Dulcie, please, I know I've been distracted lately, but... Distracted? I turned to face him. Jonas, you've been absent, physically here, but emotionally gone. Do you have any idea what that feels like? I'm trying to build something for us, he said desperately. This promotion will change everything. We can get a house, start planning a wedding. Stop, I said, holding up my hand. Just stop. I'm tired of hearing about someday. I'm tired of being an afterthought in your life. You're not an afterthought, Jonas said, standing up. You're the most important thing in my life. Then why don't I feel like it? I asked, and I could hear my voice breaking. Why do I feel like I'm competing with your job for your attention? Why do I have to beg you to spend time with me? Jonas reached for me, but I stepped back. I think, I said slowly, the words feeling heavy on my tongue, we need to take a break. What? The color drained from Jonas's face. Dulcie, no, we can work this out. I'll do better, I promise. You've promised that before, I said. Nothing changes, and I can't keep living like this, feeling invisible in my own relationship. I pulled out my phone and, before I could lose my nerve, typed out a message. I'm done with you. I deserve better. I hit send and watched Jonas's phone light up on the coffee table. He stared at the message, then at me, his face a mask of shock and hurt. You're really doing this? He asked quietly. I have to, I said, though part of me wanted to take it all back. I have to choose myself for once. Jonas nodded slowly, like he was processing something he couldn't quite believe. Okay, he said finally, if that's what you want. It is, I said, though the words felt strange in my mouth. I went to bed that night feeling like I'd finally taken control of my life. I'd stopped accepting less than I deserved. I'd chosen myself. It would be weeks before I realized what I'd actually chosen to give up. The next few weeks passed in a blur of validation and excitement. Word of our breakup spread quickly through our social circle, and I found myself fielding calls and texts from friends wanting to know what had happened. I told them the truth, that Jonas had prioritized work over our relationship, that I'd felt invisible and unappreciated. Most of them were sympathetic. My sister Ellie was particularly supportive, taking me out for drinks and reassuring me that I'd made the right choice. You look happier already, she said as we sat at the same cafe where Marcus had confronted me weeks earlier. More like yourself. She was right. I did feel more like myself. Leo and I had been spending more time together, both at work and outside of it. He'd taken me to lunch at nice restaurants, brought me coffee in the mornings, and made me feel desirable in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. We hadn't crossed any physical lines yet, but the emotional intimacy was intoxicating. He texted me good morning and good night every day. He remembered details about my life that Jonas had never bothered to learn. He made me feel seen and valued. I'm thinking about asking Leo to be my date to Sarah's wedding next month, I told Ellie, stirring my latte. The cute marketing guy. Ellie grinned. Go for it. You deserve someone who makes you happy. I was about to respond when I saw a familiar figure approaching our table. Marcus Blackwell looked even less pleased to see me than usual. Dulcie, he said coldly, not bothering to sit down. I heard about you and Jonas. Word travels fast, I replied, trying to keep my voice light. He's devastated, Marcus said bluntly. I hope you're happy. I'm not happy that he's hurt, I said, feeling defensive, but I'm not going to apologize for refusing to be ignored anymore. Ignored? Marcus laughed harshly. The man was working himself to death trying to build a future for both of you, and you call that being ignored? He was working himself to death, period, I shot back. When was the last time he planned a date, or asked about my day, or did anything that showed he still wanted to be with me? Maybe he would have had more energy for romance if he wasn't carrying the financial burden for both of you, Marcus said. I pay half the bills, I said, my voice rising. And even if I didn't, that doesn't give him the right to treat me like furniture. Ellie jumped to my defense. She deserves better than someone who takes her for granted. She deserves better. Marcus turned his attention to my sister. Jonas is one of the most loyal, hard-working men I know. He was planning to propose after he got the promotion. He had it all figured out, the ring, the restaurant, everything. But apparently that wasn't good enough for Princess here. I felt like I'd been slapped. He was going to propose. Was being the operative phrase, Marcus said cruelly. Hard to propose to someone who's already moved on to her coworker. The cafe went quiet around us. I could feel other patrons staring, drawn by the raised voices and obvious drama. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my cheeks were burning. "Really? Because half the office has seen you and Leo Dorman together. Lunch dates, coffee runs, cozy conversations in the break room. Jonas might be too heartbroken to see what's going on, but the rest of us aren't blind." "We're friends," I said weakly. "Right," Marcus said sarcastically. "Just like you and Jonas were taking a break instead of you dumping him via text message like a teenager." The shame hit me like a physical blow. I had ended a 5-year relationship with a text message. I had been spending time with Leo, while technically still with Jonas. When Marcus laid it out like that, it sounded terrible. "You don't understand," I started, but Marcus cut me off. "I understand perfectly. You got bored with a good man because he wasn't entertaining enough for you. You wanted drama and excitement, so you found it with someone else. Just don't pretend you're the victim here." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at me. "By the way, Jonas got the promotion. He'll be making 6 figures now. I'm sure Leo will be very impressed." After he left, Ellie and I sat in uncomfortable silence. The other cafe patrons gradually returned to their conversations, but I could still feel their curious glances. "Don't listen to him," Ellie said finally. "He's just trying to make you feel guilty." But I did feel guilty. Marcus's words had hit uncomfortably close to home. Had I given up on Jonas too easily? Had I been emotionally cheating with Leo? "Maybe I should call him," I said. "Congratulate him on the promotion." "No," Ellie said firmly. "You made the right choice. Marcus is just trying to manipulate you because he's angry. Jonas had 5 years to propose, and he chose to wait until it was convenient for his career. That tells you everything you need to know about his priorities." I nodded, but her words didn't make me feel better. As we left the cafe, I caught sight of Linda Blackwell, Jonas's mother, sitting at a corner table. She'd obviously overheard the entire confrontation, and the look she gave me was pure ice. I'd always had a good relationship with Linda, but the disappointment in her eyes made my stomach churn with guilt. That evening, Leo took me to dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant. He was charming as always, making me laugh with stories about his weekend and asking thoughtful questions about my day. But I found it hard to focus on the conversation. "You seem distracted," he observed as we shared a bottle of wine. "Everything okay?" I told him about the confrontation with Marcus, watching his face for his reaction. "Sounds like his brother is pretty protective," Leo said with a shrug. "Can't blame him for being upset, but that doesn't mean he's right." "Do you think I made the right choice?" I asked, needing reassurance. Leo reached across the table and took my hand. "Dulcie, you were miserable. You deserved better than being taken for granted. Sometimes relationships run their course, and that's okay." His words were exactly what I wanted to hear, but they didn't chase away the nagging doubt that had been growing since my conversation with Marcus. "Besides," Leo continued, "look how much happier you are now. You're glowing. You're confident. You're finally free to be yourself." He was right. I was happier. I was free to spend time with someone who appreciated me, who made me feel desirable and interesting, someone who chose to be with me instead of treating me like an obligation. "You're right," I said, squeezing his hand. "I am happier." But as Leo walked me to my car after dinner, I couldn't shake the image of Linda Blackwell's disappointed face, or the knowledge that Jonas had been planning to propose. "I had a wonderful time tonight," Leo said, stepping closer to me in the parking lot. "Me too," I said, looking up at him. For a moment I thought he was going to kiss me. Part of me wanted him to, but instead he just brushed a strand of hair away from my face. "Soon," he said softly, and I knew he meant when enough time had passed, when it wouldn't look so much like I'd left Jonas for him. But as I drove home to the apartment I was still sharing with Jonas, he'd been staying at his mother's house since our breakup, I couldn't help wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The apartment felt empty and cold without him. His coffee mug still sat in the sink, and his favorite sweater was draped over the back of the couch, small reminders of the life we'd built together, the life I'd walked away from. I found myself looking at the text I'd sent him. "I'm done with you. I deserve better." The words looked harsh and cruel on the screen. Had I really ended 5 years with such a cold, dismissive message? My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Sweet dreams, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I smiled and typed back a heart emoji, pushing away the guilt and doubt. I'd made my choice. Now I had to live with it. But deep down, I was starting to suspect that living with it might be harder than I'd thought. 2 months after our breakup, I was finally starting to feel like I had my life together. Leo and I had made our relationship official, much to the delight of my sister and mother. He was everything Jonas wasn't: spontaneous, romantic, attentive. He brought me flowers for no reason, planned surprise dates, and made me feel like the center of his universe. I'd been staying in the apartment alone since Jonas had moved his things out. He'd been surprisingly civil about the whole thing, arranging to pick up his belongings while I was at work to avoid any awkward confrontations. I'd expected him to fight for us, to make some grand gesture, but he'd simply accepted my decision and moved on. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was disappointed. It was a Tuesday morning in June when everything changed. I was getting ready for work, humming along to the radio while I did my makeup, when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I assumed it was a package delivery. I opened the door with a smile, ready to sign for whatever I'd ordered online and forgotten about. Instead, I found myself face to face with a man in an expensive suit holding a manila envelope. "Dulcinea Vane?" he asked. "Yes," I said, suddenly wary. "You've been served," he said, handing me the envelope. "Have a good day." I stood in the doorway, staring at the envelope in my hands as the man walked away. My name was written across the front in official-looking letters, and there was a law firm's logo in the corner. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. The first page made my blood run cold. Notice to quit and demand for possession of premises. I scanned the legal jargon with growing horror. Jonas was evicting me. Not only that, but he was demanding immediate separation of all shared assets, closure of joint accounts, and reimbursement for expenses I'd incurred during our relationship. My hand shook as I read through the detailed list of evidence attached to the notice. Bank statements showing unexplained lunch charges during work hours. Screenshots of text messages I thought I'd deleted. Even security footage from our office building showing me and Leo entering and leaving together at suspicious times. There was more. Witness statements from coworkers who'd seen us together. Records of phone calls and messages. A complete timeline of my relationship with Leo, starting weeks before I'd officially ended things with Jonas. At the bottom of the stack was a personal note in Jonas's familiar handwriting. "Dulcie, I know you think I never paid attention, but I noticed everything. I saw the late-night texts, the changed passwords, the new clothes and makeup. I saw how you looked at your phone when you thought I wasn't watching. I just hoped I was wrong. The evidence speaks for itself. You deserve better than me, and I deserve better than this. Consider us even. Jay." I sat on the couch surrounded by the papers that ended my life as I knew it. Ellie called first. "He's suing me for defamation. Mum got hit with harassment papers. Half our friends are subpoenaed." "Dulcie, what did you do?" Then Leo. "Hey, this is getting messy. I'm out. Good luck." Then a text from a number I didn't know. "This is Jonas. Don't call. Don't text. My lawyer speaks for me now. I loved you. I'm done." That was it. 5 years reduced to 3 sentences and a court date. I kept staring at the bank statements, lunches with Leo while I told Jonas I was working late. The photos, the itemized list of every time I'd rolled my eyes at him in front of friends and called it venting. He hadn't been distant those last months. He'd been building a case. While I was busy proving I was neglected, he was quietly, methodically proving I was cruel. The apartment lease is in his name. The furniture is in his name. Even the cat is in his name. In 30 days, I'll be gone, and the only thing I get to take is the knowledge that everyone, my mother, my friends, the man who said he couldn't live without me, now sees exactly who I am. Jonas never raised his voice. He just waited until he had receipts for every tear he swallowed. I thought I was leaving a quiet man who didn't fight for me. Turns out he fought harder than I ever imagined. He just did it in court instead of the kitchen. And he won. I got my freedom. It came with an eviction notice, a ghosted lover, and a reputation in ashes. He got peace. I guess we both got exactly what we deserved. He just made sure of it.